Waiting for Reverend Aaron Long to arrive. As we continue to discuss Sola Scriptura.
Sorry, Donald.
It's okay.
I ended up, because of Peter, in contact. This is a weird story, and I want to tell it.
Okay.
All right. In 99, 2000, Steve Camp, who was over the Southern Conference, went on a fire sale with Catawba College and Blowing Rock Assembly, all of our old RCUS institutions.
Okay.
And he shut down at Catawba the North Carolina Classis Historical Society, which had all of our founding documents going back to the 1730s.
Why would he do that?
Because they were trying to erase our history.
Yeah, that was one of Karl Marx's approaches and tactics, was to erase history.
Right.
And that was done by the old Reformed Episcopalians, including that shifter in Dallas.
Right.
Get rid of the history and use all kinds of things to diminish it.
Well, in the trip between Catawba and Lancaster, running up 81.
What's Catawba?
Catawba is our college. We started it. It's down in it's over in Salisbury.
Salisbury, North Carolina?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, it sat on the old Historical Society sat on campus at Catawba. And in the trip up 81, a bunch of stuff fell off the truck, if that makes any sense. Not literally fell off the truck, read between the lines.
I got you.
Well, we've been looking for this stuff, and I'm talking about like when at Bethany, where I grew up, they were still using they called it the Black Book. They were still using the original roll book from 1789. When I was confirmed and all that, my name got entered into that book, and documents like that, they all disappeared. Well, I got a phone call because Peter is a historian. Whether you agree with him theologically or not, he's actually a really good historian. And he's in all these.
Can we do a little detour there?
Yeah.
Peter, or somebody's posted for Peter, his critique of the continuing Anglicans.
Yeah, I told you he was getting ready to do that.
Which was good. And then he called for robust Protestant theology and liturgy of varying churchmanships, which is a crummy word.
Right.
If you're a historic Anglican, you have a very high view of the Bible, you have a very high view of the Trinity, very high view of the Christology, high view of soteriology, including predestination.
Mm-hmm.
So this high-low thing just never works with me. If high means what, the silly boy's doing in Mama's Drapes, he's just down around zero to me. He's so low, you can walk on him. But anyways, Peter put that out and it was kind of good. So while you're talking about Peter, I noticed this post in this little side tour. Anyways, back to your point on Peter and.
Okay. Peter is in a bunch of these historical societies.
Oh.
And he came across a guy named William Featherman, who is actually an Anglican. His mama's side is all old RCUS from Lancaster and York counties. His daddy's side is all Falls Church Anglicans. He grew up at Falls Church.
Falls Church, Virginia?
Yeah.
Okay.
And some old Anglican church down around Wilmington. I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, he's an odd little dude, but he ended up getting his doctorate in Frankfurt type German, and he collects historical documents. and he's currently working for the Mennonite Historical Society in Pennsylvania because he can read and translate Frankertype, and he can read and write high and low German. And the ENR Historical Society is currently purging out all of their stuff because the queers that have taken it over want to basically erase what's left of the history we have.
Can I take another detour and we'll come
Yes.
back to this cancellation issue? I have regularly gone to the grave site of Robert Dabney,
Mm-hmm.
Southern Presbyterian, taught at Hampden-Sydney College and Seminary for years and years, went off in the Civil War and became the adjutant to General Stonewall Jackson, whom he knew
Yes, sir.
deeply. And he was also a chaplain to the Confederate troops. So I've been there to the gravesite at Hampden-Sydney, where his wife and 2 children are. And they used to have, as soon as you would walk into the library, on the immediate left was a super big picture, oil painting of Robert Dabney. On my last visit to the cemetery, which is attached to this small college seminary, the seminary is no longer there. The school still operates as a college. I walked in and the picture was gone.
Yeah, they took him down because the wokies are trying to erase him.
Yeah, and I went over to the 2 young librarians who were working at the counter, and I said, "What happened to, Robert Dabney?" They go, "I don't know." And then the same thing happened when my last time up at Princeton, and I go there a number of times just to thank God for his great mercies in giving us these giants. And Samuel Miller Hall, which is their chapel, Miller Chapel, used to, when you would go in, they had pictures and little plaques of all the great divines of the 19th century. B.B. Warfield, the Hodges, Archibald Alexander, Samuel Miller. Last time I was there, those were all gone.
Yeah.
Once again, cancel culture. And for Robert Dabney at Hampden-Sydney and at Princeton Seminary. And so back to your point of cancellation.
Well, Featherman has been doing translations for him at Lancaster. And he got involved with some of the people that are over it in the library and all that. And the queers that are over it now, they're a married male couple that have a hyphen.
Another detour, if you will.
Yep.
We're shifting from the cancellation to the queers and steers. I have just ordered Matthew Vine's book on gay Christians, where he favors it. I've never knew the guy. And then I just ordered Dr. Gagnon's book against the homosexual stuff. So, you see, because in my world, Aaron, we don't traffic in that. That's not an issue. It's a 5-minute problem, so to speak. I'm also got a famous book coming in on critical race theory. So I need to track down the arguments on that. And then I've got a couple of books coming in on Spangler and Amy Bird, trying to figure that story out. Anyways, back on track to what your point was regarding the steers and the queers.
All right. Well,
and for those who don't know it, steers and queers means what? Manly bulls?
Well, steers and queers are what's taken over. I stole the concept from Full Metal Jacket, but ultimately it's what I see is the men running the Napart churches and running the main line and all the rest of it. They're either outright queers or they're steers. They're a bunch of castrated men, because that's what a steer is a castrated bull.
Okay, I'm not that harsh toward Nate Park as you are, but let's go on with you
I'm
were
not saying the whole shooting match. I'm talking about the leadership.
okay.
You'll get that when you read Amy Bird and you realize they defended her, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna give her and Spangler audience and bring my theological forensic skills to the table. I think she is overstating the case in a big way and then slipping in and trying to sound biblical.
Right.
And I'm pretty alert. Something's not right with her. And Spangler, I think, is just a young, proud racist, but I don't know yet.
Well, I will say this. It goes back to what I said Tuesday, and then we'll get back to what I'm saying. Spangler is actually a product of what happens when the leftists take over and they start driving out the right wing. It ends up radicalizing the right wing. And you see this over and over again. It's honestly how the Nazis took over Germany. It's how the jihadists have taken over Islam. You have people that are right leaning that are relatively reasonable, that the more they get rejected, the farther right they drift. And I go back to something I picked up in my UCC days. They hate to hear me quote. There's an old African proverb, Donald, and this proverb is that when you don't make a place for the young men will burn down the village to be warmed by the fire.
Okay.
And that's what's happened. But that's neither here nor there. I want to move on from that.
Go on, go on.
All right. Featherman was up there doing translations, and they knew who he was, the people that worked at the library.
Yeah.
And he realized they were just throwing away stuff. Now, let me give you a list of stuff they were throwing away. Our 1700s pewter communion sets. Oh, yeah. The last known copy of the 1748 Palatinate liturgy.
In German, of course.
In German. Heidelberg catechisms that were the first English translations in America from 1803 from Hagerstown. So he's got 5 copies of Welker's History of the North Carolina Classis that there were only 250 copies of it made, which is the definitive history of the North Carolina Classis in 1912. I mean, he's bringing a truckload of stuff down here for me whenever he comes.
Another detour, which you always graciously allow. The 9th commandment. I'm a Westminster Larger Catechism man. That is sin, what's going on.
Oh, I know.
Because the 9th commandment requires you to preserve the truth and promote the truth, among several other requirements. And what this man appears to be doing is saying none of these things matter.
Right.
Which is a lie, because they are about providence. Like it or not like it, you have a right to see what divine providence was doing with these German Reformed forebears.
Right.
So this is an act of sin.
Donald, he's got copies of records from our churches going back to the 1740s that were just getting ready to go into the garbage.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, and this is stuff that you could have a transsexual lesbian black woman who's interested in her history would have a fit if they found this out. This is straight up trying to erase history.
Is there a way to bring charges against him?
No, we have actually, me and Featherman have sort of brainstormed about it, but hopefully you can make it up here. He is hopefully going to be speaking here on September 6th.
At St. Paul's?
At Paul's Chapel, because me and JT are going to do a tricentennial celebration on September 6th. Because see, this year is the 300th anniversary of the German Reformed Church in North America.
Okay.
The RCUS just had theirs. Andy went to it, and we're going to do one here in North Carolina on September 6th.
At a Sunday?
It's a Saturday.
Saturday. Is it
We're going to do a service and a presentation, and then we're going to do a meal afterward. And we're going to try to do the Palatinate liturgy if I can get it down here in time to be able to do it.
in English, of course?
In English.
What time is the meeting?
We're probably going to start gathering about 9:30, and then we'll go through until we do lunch. Because I'm going to try to get Featherman to speak. I'm probably going to speak. I'm going to see, there's actually a UCC guy who is in our historical lineage. I'm trying to make this as open and as fair to everybody, that it's about our heritage. It's not about our theological divisions currently, but we're going to talk about the Heidelberg Catechism and its impact. We're going to talk about the Palatinate liturgy. We're going to talk about the families that settled and all the rest of it.
All right, I'll just ponder the idea of coming up to join you.
Because what we want, me and JT have talked about it, and I've talked to William Sowers about it. He's out at St. Matthew's Reformed outside of Hickory. And we don't talk about who we are anymore. And that's a sad statement of affairs, and it's because the UCC literally spent 70 years trying to erase who we are. A lot of our churches have slowly drifted off because they've either become leftist hellholes, or they've been staffed when they pulled out of the UCC with Baptists and Pentecostals that don't care about our heritage. And it bothers me. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
So we're trying to restore some semblance of who we are, and we're going to collect as much as we can we're going to create a historical room here at Paul's Chapel until we can actually get a permanent place to put it in.
Gotcha.
Because see, we've got the stuff to where all of our ancestors fought in the Revolutionary War, where we fought in the Civil War. See, I've got 7 direct ancestors that fought during the Revolutionary War. I know I've got 5 that rode under Stonewall until he got assassinated. I've got the stories about the 7 Snyder brothers that were at Gettysburg, where 6 of them got killed. And the one that survived ended up stripping the uniform off a dead Union soldier and literally walked from Gettysburg back to Lexington, switching the uniform out depending on where he was at, because he knew all of his bloodline was about ready to get wiped out. We've been here. I've got ancestors. I'll never forget my great-great-grandpa Long. I actually met him. He fought in Cuba. And he had, under Roosevelt, he was with the Rough Riders. And he got 2 of his fingers and part of his third blown off because the man was a chain smoker is what he was. He lived till he was over 100, but he didn't buy cigarettes because he had a tobacco farm. And he had that one pointer finger in his thumb. And I remember even as a little kid watching him sort of snap his fingers, and he could roll a cigarette with what was left of his hand. But it just kills me. They are trying to erase everything. It's like I went back to my home church a couple of months ago, and
another detour. Another detour, if I can. That is exactly what Bishop Loser Lenny Riches did to 4 generations from 1873 to the 1990s, was to toss hate, contempt, vitriol. And I've got the YouTube for it at about the 20-minute point. where he launches into a 7 or 8 minute tirade about these faithful RECers. And of course, all the youngsters who are ignoramuses and haven't done the homework, they buy into that simplistic cancellation culture. Back to your point, we're talking about cancellation of history here.
Well, it's like when I went back to my home church, which is still unfortunately in the UCC and has a leftist pastor. I was up there for something and we were talking about it. And the pastor that is there currently did not realize, see, Bethany still has its 1789 sanctuary. You can't see it because it was a wooden structure and they plastered over the inside and they bricked over the outside because they've moved the building 4 times. It's been on the same piece of property, but they kept moving. Okay. Because they moved, the graveyard kept moving forward, and they moved it. And when they built the school, they moved it back. And anyway,
one more detour.
Yeah.
Did I mention? Yeah, I think I did, that my psychiatrist has deep and long-term German Reformed roots back into the 1700s.
Yeah.
We got into that. Anyways, I mentioned that last time. I mentioned it again.
But I'm going to tell you this. When I got to talking to him about it and telling him, and I showed him, because in the bell tower, you can open up the bell tower where they ring the bell in the Sunday mornings and
right.
Look, and you can still see the original wooden structure inside that. Well, last time I talked to him, he'd gotten to do research, and he told me he was glad they plastered over the inside, that he wished they would have ripped it down, because he said from what he read, they had a balcony in there where they put the black people, and we didn't believe in slavery. And I had to inform him that we didn't support slavery even back then. And the balcony wasn't for black people. It was just a balcony in the sanctuary, because it used to have one of those originally it had one of the teardrop pulpits, like it's still down at Grace Lowerstone. If you ever get a chance and can go into Grace Lowerstone, you need to check it out. It still uses its 1789 sanctuary. It's an old stone church, and it's still got its balcony in it. On its east wall, it has an altar table and it has a communion rail. But the pulpit is halfway down the north wall, and it's got a long spiral staircase that goes up. And when you're in the pulpit, you are eye to eye with the balcony. And it's one of the more interesting places. When Peter went down there, we were laughing because Peter pointed out something that none of them knew. Because, see, we still, I think, from what I've been able to read, wore surplices for doing the service part. But there is a hook in the back of the pulpit at Grace Lowerstone. And everybody's wondered what that hook was for, like a coat hook. What the coat hook was for is the pastor would do the service wearing a surplice, but when he mounted the pulpit, he put his academic robe on, and what that hook was for was to hold the academic robe.
Gotcha.
The black gown.
Yeah.
Because he could not preach without his black gown on.
By the way, I found my black gown. I remember I came out your way. I couldn't find it, but I did find it.
Well, good. I was afraid your wife had thrown it away.
I think I'll be buried in it. I think I'd rather that than a suit and tie. So,
well, you're clergy. You should be.
Yeah.
But Donald, I've thought about you saying you've missed out. What you've missed out on is you have, on a degree, been lucky, because you've spent most of your career, even though the REC has drifted, the REC, even to this day, is almost a version of the continuers. It's never been a part of the main line. So your exposure to the main line has all come through the churches your wife worked at, because you just think the politics are nasty in the churches you've dealt with. These main, I mean, they're awful. I think I've told you before, I ended up having to take a homiletics seminar under under Reverend Wright. Do you remember who Reverend Wright is?
No.
Reverend Wright was President Obama's preacher in Chicago.
Oh, no.
And
You studied under that racist?
I wasn't allowed to have a choice. I had to have the seminar.
And he was teaching.
Yes, he was out at Lancaster doing a seminar on it. And I'll tell you, I'll never forget, he told us, what you believe is nowhere near as important as what you say. And he went on a whole tirade about how pastors need to learn from used car dealers how to sell people on stuff.
You know, I'm doing this work on racism and, white supremacy, which Spangler is accused of.
Yeah.
But as I was thinking about it, there are two rocks on the program called The View. That's Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar. Both of them are rocks, except they're dumber.
Right.
You got a white lady who's as dumb as can be, and a black lady who's not only dumb but got a loud mouth. So complete opposite of any supremacism. So we got, on the other hand, we got a black guy like Dr. Ben Carson, who's top drawer. Is this white supremacism? Anyways, off topic again.
Well, as you go through what you're reading, and this is something I would like us to take, even if we have to suspend the Sola Scriptura for a couple of shows, I would like us to delve into, because I think your audience needs to hear about it. I've got all of my copies and all of my books. I found them going through the library at the parsonage the other day. I've got my Rules for Radicals, all my Saul Alinsky stuff still over there.
Oh, yeah.
And I would sort of like for me to sort of lead us through Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. I want you to read the critical race theory stuff. I want you to read the feminist stuff. I want you to read the gay stuff. And I want you to get it under your belt. And when we talk, I don't want to do the Rules for Radicals until you've already gone through all that.
That's going to take a while because
no, and I get that it's not something that's pressing, because I want you to read that stuff, and I want you to make your forensic decisions before I get into the brass tacks of how they make the sausage.
By the way, I'm reading the Oxford Handbook on Ecumenism. And my theory is being supported. It is visible unity is the big thing. Doctrine can be compromised. It just can be compromised. And everybody notices it. The Pope, some popes, confessional Lutherans, steadfast Baptists who are absolutely opposed to it. And then there's one phrase where it says confessionalism stops ecumenical endeavor.
Right.
My theory is when I open this, it's a 600-page book. I'm about in page 200. Is that is recurring over and over again. So my theory is proving to be proven.
Well, I want to wait until you've done all your reading.
Okay.
Because you're going to come to the intellectual reasoning, but there's going to be in the back of your mind the question, why and how? And when you read Alinsky, you get the why and how. Because what Alinsky does is he gives voice to the Frankfurt School. And the Frankfurt School is what is the solid root of all of this. Do you know what I'm talking about when I say the Frankfurt School?
I've heard of it, but it's I can't connect any ideas with it.
All right. The Frankfurt School was a group of German professors who were committed Marxists who
Okay.
in the 1930s
Okay.
were given refuge by FDR.
Oh,
They come to America. They end up at Yale. They end up at Princeton. They end up at Harvard. They end up at Columbia. But they stay in connection with each other. As the war progresses, they realize that what Soviet communism is radically different than what they wanted in their socialist ideal. So what they do is they take Marx, they strip the economics out of it, and they replace economics with whatever oppressed group they see. So what you've got in the Frankfurt School is nothing but pure Marxism with the economics removed. So the feminists use it.
I got
All the different radicals use it. And Alinsky basically studied this and learned how to weaponize it. What a lot of people don't realize is Saul Alinsky was one of the driving forces behind Vatican II. Saul Alinsky made friends through the bishops in Chicago, even though Alinsky was a Jew. He was a Jew in name only, he was an atheist. But he made friends with the man who would eventually be Paul VI. Alinsky, the Jesuits had to study under Alinsky. They had picked up on Alinsky early on. And they studied under him, and they used Alinsky's tactics to be able to allow the progressive wing of the Roman Church to take over using the title, the Spirit of Vatican II. A lot of your mainline denominations studied under Alinsky's disciples. President Obama and Hillary Clinton both did dissertations on Alinsky. Hillary actually studied with Alinsky as one of her professors. And in Rules for Radicals, to tell you how wicked the man was, do you know who he dedicated Rules for Radicals to?
no.
Lucifer. Alinsky was quoted on, I can't remember what show it was. He said he didn't believe in hell, but he said that if he died and he went to hell, he'd be happier than if he went into heaven, because Alinsky saw hell as a place of the oppressed, and he would organize them and take the place over.
Yeah, well, that sounds good. I think I have read it, or have it around here, but I don't know offhand.
Well, but to me, it is important, and it is the missing piece that a lot of people don't get. What you are seeing is sociopathy. Okay? Whether we're talking about Shifty, whether we're talking about Riches, any of them, what you are seeing as sociopathy is straight up Alinskyite tactics put to play. Because I'll give you a real quick rundown. One of the things Alinskyeites do right off the bat is they identify their enemy. They study their enemy. They come to know their enemy. And then they pick out one person and they start to attack them. And they go after them hammer and tongs. And they try to make that one person the scapegoat, because in destroying who they see as their greatest enemy, they lift themselves up to a position in power. And they twist it to where that enemy is seen as the cause of everybody's problems. But then when they achieve power, they end up persecuting everybody else. But they do it by basically splitting and conquering. All right, Shifty ends up with issues with you, even though there's a myriad of different voices coming against him. What does he do? He focuses all of his attention on you by sending his little peons and his minions against you.
Is it still true that I think you mentioned last year or so, or the year before, when I went after Shifty on his Anglican office book, that because I sent that out widely, one email per week for a year, including all the acronym bishops, you indicated that I was a well-known person and they were afraid of me.
Yeah, but you can see it in Paul. This is it. Basically, they have all adopted Alinsky's attack methods. They've adopted his methodology, and that is the sociopathy that you are seeing. I'm not saying these people aren't sociopaths, but they're practiced sociopaths, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, I'm very anxious for you to kind of steer and guide the discussion and review the Alinsky tactics, because then we can counterattack.
Well, there's actually a good book by an Orthodox writer called Rules for Retrogrades, which I have at the house too, where there is an Orthodox layman that wrote it, and he had fought the Alinskyites in the labor movement. And he goes through and he shows how to counter everything they do. And the problem is, and this is why I use the word steers all the time. I think there are a lot of people that are quote unquote well-intentioned conservatives that have had their balls cut off. They're well-intentioned traditionalists that have had their balls cut off. And they don't know how to fight. And they especially don't know how to fight something as insidious as something like this. All right, we're not going to get to Sola Scriptura today, but you asked about Trapp. Trapp, I got his collected works in. I'm going to be starting to go through that here in the next couple of weeks.
What are the dates on Trapp?
Trapp was a Anglican cleric before the English Civil War who had Presbyterian sympathies. He would be considered a Puritan. He did most of his writing after the Great Ejection. I keep finding weird stuff. I don't know whether he got ejected or not, but he always had Puritan sympathies. He did a commentary, though, on the entire Bible. It's a 5-volume set. And Beakey had it on sale with a copy of the Reformation Heritage Study Bible for like $150. So I just went ahead while it was on sale and bought it. And I've always sort of been interested in it because you don't find outside of Matthew Henry a lot of complete commentaries. And all the Puritans wrote commentaries, but they wrote it on this book or that book. They didn't write it on the whole Bible.
Gotcha.
And when I had it come up, I thought I'd write it. And it's Richard Baxter thought really highly of Trapp. I found that out because he said Trapp was practical. He was a practical commentator.
Okay.
But I've got to go. I'm sorry, Tom.
Okay.
You've gone all over creation today.
Yeah, well, it's a good gab fest. So I'll see you next Tuesday, God willing.
All right. We'll see you Tuesday, Donald.
Bye-bye.
Bye.